So I'm the oldest of five, and somehow, when I was quite young, I finally reached an age where my parents felt comfortable leaving me with my grandparents so that they could get a weekend off. Maybe you've been there. That first weekend out of the house is a time of great joy and rest. And when they came back, they found my grandparents a little frazzled, as you might imagine. And they simply gave my mother a pin that said, "Because." And apparently this is because I spent the entire weekend asking, why? Why? You can't do this, Dan. Why? Well, you're going to get hurt. Why? Right? That curiosity that is in so many of us as we're starting out. And there's different things that you can pull out of this gospel. I'm sure you've heard a lot of priests preach on being a child. But in this particular setting of this reading, with these two fragments put together, the idea of the question comes to mind, right? Jesus has this difficult truth to lay before the disciples. There's a bit about the future here. Things are going to get quite bad for a while. But then they're going to get remarkably and mysteriously better. And you might think that the disciples would be asking, well, resurrection? What do you mean you're going to rise, you know? But they're afraid to ask. They're afraid to ask. Why? We could only speculate. Maybe they don't want to talk about this dark future that Jesus is outlining. Maybe they don't want to talk about going through this difficulty before the good things get here. Are they afraid of Jesus as a person? Is he not the kind of person that they would want to ask questions of? But Jesus kind of addresses this by putting a child in their midst. And one of the things that we can take from this, I think, is that the children are not afraid to ask questions. They're curious. There's so much about the world that they need to know, and learning things is their natural state. Going to school and asking and learning. And why? Why do we do it this way? Why do we do it this way? What is the hidden wisdom here? What do I need to learn? In Jesus' ministry, he deals with all kinds of people. And I think one way of looking at it is that he's looking for people of great love, people that are willing to open their hearts and care for one another. But I would suggest to you that he's also looking for people of great curiosity, people that are willing to listen. He sometimes talks about people whose hearts are opened, whose ears are open, they can hear, their eyes are open, they can see. They're curious about the world around them. They're curious about what Jesus has to say. They're curious about what it might be like to be one of their neighbors. I had the opportunity as a priest to be at a cemetery for a burial. It's a big part of what we do. It was a little country cemetery that maybe only saw a couple burials a year, and it was a bitterly cold day with a strong driving wind. Not the kind of time that you want to be out there, and I was there with the honor guard, a couple of Marines as it happened. And I started talking to one of them. It turned out to be a trans woman, and I was curious. What's it like, right? You know, you kind of seen both sides. What's it like? What's it different? Tell me the story. And she said, first of all, she said, everything's a lot colder. And I could believe that on a day like that when the snow was blowing. And then she thought about it for a minute and she said, my sense of smell is better. She said, you know what? Men stink. And I always remember that. But someone that was curious, that was willing to try something different, that was willing to explore. What is it like over there? What is it that God has in store for me? The opposite of that, I think, is someone that is convinced that they already have all the answers. Maybe they're relying on the law or whatever it may be. They've stopped being curious. Maybe you know people like that. I don't know what causes that at different times. I think sometimes people are hurt or they're afraid, kind of build up those walls and hang on to the old truths because it's more comfortable. They're more worried about being caught in some error and having to admit that they were wrong than they are about making sure they've got the truth in the first place and really understand what it is that God is asking of them. So scriptures again and again invite us to a kind of a humility and an openness to what God is doing. I laugh sometimes. We have that sing a new song, that song that says sing a new song. We've been singing that song since I was born, at least. And it's always the same song about singing a new song. But it has to be a part of our faith, our experience of liturgy and of worship, a willingness to try something new that shows us that we're not relying on human customs or habits, but we're really in touch with what God is asking of us even now. After Jesus dies, and indeed he rises, and the disciples begin to understand what he was trying to teach them, they have to sort through all these practices that they have inherited from the past. We can't eat shellfish. Why? We can't eat pork. Why? We can't hang out with Gentiles. Why? What is it that God is really asking of us? And so I think every generation has to answer this question. We have to look at what we have received and say, what in this is important? Do we have a really good reason for doing this? Maybe it's not immediately apparent. But then what is it that maybe we need to let go of? Venture out into something new and unfamiliar. Maybe God is inviting us once more into the desert to find something different and find something new.